Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to this taping of the Bambie Nicole Show. Today is kind of a viewer's choice. We're going to talk about how I got started with becoming Bambie, my journey, my transition, and whatnot. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show as I talk to you. This is kind of like story time with Bambie on how I began my journey in life and transition to become Bambie Nicole. I want you to understand that during this story time that to become where I'm at now came with immeasurable amounts of pain. I had to literally sacrifice everything, and I had to start a whole entire new life. Now, what I mean by that is that what people fail to understand is that when you are a child and you come out to your family, come out to your mother, come out to your brother, or come out in general as being transgender, a lot of times it's one of those things that it's going to take a while to digest. It's not like I can come out to my family on Friday as, oh, well, I want to become a woman, or if you're a female to male, where I want to become a man, and by Monday everybody's fine and everything's dandy. This is kind of a journey that takes a long time to digest, and I want you to understand that. So during the duration of my personal life, it was known ever since I was little. I remember my mother was always extremely accepting of it. My brother always knew. My father always knew. This wasn't anything that was, a big hidden secret, because when I was little, I always took to dolls, and I always took to Barbies, and I always took to girly dress up, and I always took to makeup. I remember a personal story was when I was actually in kindergarten. They had called my mother up one day because I remember they were doing some assignment in the class, and they were separating the boys from the girls. And of course, I went with the girls because I've always known that I was a girl. And so I threw a fit because I was not going to conform, and I was not going to be with the boys. I wasn't a little boy, and I always knew that. And so they called my mother, and that was kind of like the start of where my mom was like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my child? Um, you know, I've done another video on being raised with dolls, but I came up in a household where I was, around dolls, and I was around dress up, and I always went to girly things. That's just kind of the way that it was. Now, in my adolescence, understand that I don't ever condone or tell anybody to follow the journey that I've taken, but this is kind of an intimate story for you. I actually really started to live as a woman when I was 15 years old. Yes. I went to a performing arts school because I was gifted in acting. And the teacher told me that I was probably, only talented for doing drag shows or whatever else, because that's how people thought back, in the 90s and in the 80s. This wasn't anything that, it wasn't as out there as it is nowadays. So she just kind of encouraged me that, if I was going to be, they put me down a lot. I remember that the school had called my mother when I was 15 because I actually showed up to school in a dress. How I started to show up was 10th grade. I went as a girl for Halloween, and I never stopped after that. Like, after that, I was like, fuck it. I don't care what anybody says about me. Kiss my ass. And really, that's not the mentality that I should have had. Really, I should have kind of waited and went more androgynously, because I did end up dropping out of school. And again, don't follow my footsteps, because my footsteps in the beginning were very kind of scattered, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing, and I didn't have anybody out here showing me anything. So I started, like I said, to live as a woman when I was 15. Now, the irony of it was I was going to school as a woman. I was working as a woman. I believe I was working at Hollywood Video back then. So I was going to work as a woman. I was going to school as a woman, but then I would have to come home, and where my stepfather and my stepbrother and my brother were, I had to be a boy. So it was hell, because what I would do is I would go shop. I would buy girls' clothes, come home, and have to put boys' clothes on top of them. So I would literally take two pairs of clothes to school. I would take my girl clothes underneath and I would wear my boy clothes on top, and I would actually change on the bus because it was no big surprise. Everybody knew because I was always out with it. Now, make a long story short, when I was 17 years old, I started to take estrogen therapy from girls that I kind of knew from the community or drag queens that I met. You know, I got introduced to one when I was in high school. So I kind of started taking black market estrogen pills. Now, it didn't really do much of anything for me. So this was back when I was still kind of living with my family. And you know, I remember my mom had found my estrogen pills one time and asked me what the hell this was because they were birth control pills and whatnot. And I just told her that this was what I was going to do. And I knew that at the day that I turned 18, I actually moved out because it was very hard on my stepfather and on my brother and on my step family to accept my transition. So I moved out. Now, years later, you know, my brother starts kind of getting picked on in school, and people are calling him names. And I remember all the neighbors were talking and everybody, I was the talk of the town. So this was when I was 18. So it must have been like a year or two later. I said, fuck it. I've got to move away from everybody. I've got to live a stealth and I've got to transition. So I've got to move away and get away from everybody. I was tired of the judgment calls. I was tired of the casting of stones. I was tired of being the city, the town freak. So I moved states and states and states and states and states and states away. Now, when I moved states and states and states and states away, I got introduced into doing drag shows, and I was an entertainer all over Atlanta for a few years. And from me performing on stages and from me going to the gay clubs, I actually met a doctor in a gay club in Atlanta who diagnosed gender identity disorder, dysphoria, and that's how I got into seeing a doctor. And from there, I was prescribed hormones and I began my transition really. And this was when I was 21, because when I moved here, when I was like 19 going on 20, it was extremely hard to find a doctor because back in these days, this was almost 10 years ago, 2003 through like 2000, it was extremely hard to find a doctor that would even work with gender identity disorder. So I actually was lucky enough to be performing in a nightclub in Midtown Atlanta and found a doctor that way when I was doing a show. He could tell that I needed to see a doctor, and we had a beer, and I came in to see him, I believe, within a week. And that's where I really started my process or my journey into, becoming Bambie. Now, the Bambie Nicole persona is different, of course, from who I naturally am on a daily basis because I created Bambie, my character, who is a part of me through my showgirl days because I was in acting classes. I had been on stages ever since I was 12 years old. I was put into acting schools. I was in acting a long time ago. So through my acting experiences, through my showgirl days of being on stage, I was able to create the Bambie Nicole persona to bring about for you. So with my opening story, I really began true therapy back in 2005. Now, I started experimenting again with estrogen and whatnot I'm talking 2000. So 2000 to 2005, I was on and off therapy, buying it wherever I could, black market, drag queens, whoever. And then in 2005 was when I found a legitimate doctor and I started to take them full time, injections twice a month. And I've been doing that now for almost the past 10 years. The one thing that I have to say is that as you transition, everybody and everything tends to transition along with you. So now the ones that were casting stones, those neighbors, the bullies, even my own family, have transitioned along with me and now accept me as the woman that I've become. The sad thing, and the thing that really breaks my heart, is the fact that it took a transition physically for them to visually see what has always been there. I'm no different than I've always been a woman, Granted, my mind has been rewired, my emotions are different, and I've physically went through a puberty to feminize my body to become a woman. But now the cool thing is that everything's worked out, and I'm closer now to my father, my stepfather, my mother. I'm closer to everybody now than I've ever been. And I'm a brother, sister, and I'm a mommy's girl, and I'm a daddy's girl, and my stepfather, looks at me as like his little girl. So the thing with that is again, for my piece of advice for you, is that as you transition, everything tends to transition along with you. And it takes a long time. Remember, this is another puberty. So my advice to you is that if you need to start a journey, or if you want to start a journey, seek out medical attention, find doctors, find psychologists that will work with you, take your hormones and transition slowly, because you're putting yourself into a whole other puberty. That is going to take a long time to become how you feel on the inside. So I transitioned, became a woman. I was living in stealth during my transition. Well, I transitioned, became a woman physically, mentally, emotionally, and visually. And then I created the Bambie Nicole persona to come out here and share my story, to inspire, motivate, or just share an experience with people so that you're not alone. Thank you for tuning in to this taping of the Bambie Nicole Show on my start, how I, began to transition, and how I created the persona of Bambie. I hope that I see you love sometime soon. And don't forget to follow me on Facebook, www.facebook.com/Bambie Show. I will see you love sometime soon. Bye-bye.